special behind-the-scenes look at Medusa, Reclaiming the Myth. I'm James Wetzel, the producer of adult programs at the Museum of Science, and I'm so thrilled to introduce and moderate this conversation tonight with this incredible group of artists. Medusa is a piece that is so near to our team's heart at the museum. We've been developing it for over 2 years at this point with this incredible creative team led by the fearless Brian King, Nathan Cohen, and what time is it, Mr.Fox. And after a sold-out summer run last summer, and then another set of sold-out encore performances this winter, we still get tons of questions about this piece. When is it coming back? But also, what was the process like? How did this all come together? And so when we were putting together this virtual lineup of events, I thought it would be the perfect time to get the team together and share a little bit of the behind the scenes of the process behind this hit piece. And we have members of the creative team with us tonight, as well as excerpts from the show and some other great surprises. So it's going to be a wonderful evening. We're thrilled to have you all with us. Tonight is a part of our current virtual season of adult programming at the Museum of Science. We have turned the museum into a virtual museum, offering free STEM-related programming on a daily basis through our digital platforms. And as a part of that, we have launched our Subspace Adult Programs After Dark channel to host tonight's event and the rest of our upcoming lineup. We have some incredible events still to come, still to even be announced. So I encourage you to check out that lineup. Keep coming on back and hanging out with us after dark. I need to thank our friends from the Lowell Institute for their continued support of the adult programming. Without them, we would not be here tonight. This event would not be happening, nor would it be free. So please join me in giving a huge virtual round of applause and thanks to the Lowell Institute. And after the event tonight, if you can, I ask you to go to mos.org/science matters and show your support for MOS at Home and allow us to keep bringing content like this into all of your homes. Once again, that's mos.org/science matters. But now I'm thrilled to kick off the show. We're going to dive right in with an excerpt from the show. This is Devil vs. Scarecrow, and I'll be back after with some special guests. Enjoy, and thank you.
Bravo, my daughter. You've struck terror into the hearts of your people. They fear your power once again.
Yes, pandering to their infantile misogyny fills me with pride.
You rule them with a language they can understand, and with one of the most tremendous monsters in the history of creation. Maybe even on par with the Kraken. It's simply terrifying.
Yes, she is. A horrific nightmare for all men.
Until she's slain by a hero.
I don't see that happening anytime soon. She's quite invincible.
Well, I don't know. I like to give the mortals a hero now and then. Gives them hope. Someone to look up to down there.
Perhaps a woman.
We've had enough of your experiments for the time being, Athena. No, a virile male youth. A young man who slays the terrible beast with nothing but muscle and wit. The stuff of legends.
What a novel idea, Father.
But not today. Today we celebrate your beautiful monstrosity, Medusa the Gorgon.
No sun down, pray there ain't no moon, pray there ain't no blood or they'll be coming back soon. Pray there ain't no sun down, pray there ain't no moon, pray there ain't no blood or they'll be coming back soon. Coming back soon, coming back soon. Pray there ain't no blood or they'll be coming back soon. Don't believe in no
Amazing. What a way to start the show. And I am joined now with two very special guests, two of the creative forces behind Medusa, Brian King and Nathan Cohen. Hello, friends.
Hi.
Hello, great to see you.
Thank
Thank
you
you for having us.
Thank you for being here tonight and letting us share this experience. So before we get started, why don't each of you, again, reintroduce yourselves, but also talk a little bit about your roles in the piece.
So my name's Brian King. I'm a singer-songwriter and also do some performance art, write monologues, and have done other theater pieces with the band that I'm in with Nathan. What time is it, Mr.Fox? And in this piece, I wrote the play, and the rest was a big collaboration.
Great.
And I'm Nathan Cohen. When I'm not working with Brian, I'm working in the strings program in the Rockport schools and at Endicott College. And with Brian, I realized I've been making music with Brian for about half of my life. And so we've been sort of creative partners in lots of different projects for a really long time. And in this co-creator of this project after Brian hatched this hell of a script.
Yeah. So I just want to jump right in. There's so much to cover tonight. And so I think the first question is just, where did the inspiration to dive into the classic myth of Medusa come from?
Well, as a kid, I was always really attracted to and drawn to strong women characters in mythology and in fantasy. And I think it has to do with growing up queer. I was often told I was, acting like a girl. It's you run like a girl, you talk like a girl, like being a girl was bad, so I was learning about patriarchy at a very young age. So I wonder, analyzing my younger brain, if I was drawn to these characters because they were women who were so powerful, they had magic and they were fierce. So whether it was the Wicked Witch of the West or the White Queen in Narnia, and Medusa. I remember seeing the Clash of the Titans as a kid, and just, I thought she was where it's at. And she's so punk rock. She's such an emblem for so many people that want to challenge the protocols around how women should look and what beauty is, and that's that was sort of the impetus for me. But it wasn't until later, when I got older, that I actually read her background story, and that's when I started thinking I could do something with it. I felt even more deeply drawn in.
Great, and that's a good point. So can you just, for those who don't know, I was one of them before diving into this process with you, what is the original story of Medusa?
Yeah, there's lots of different tellings of the Medusa story. I was reviewing Ovid's telling of it recently. Ovid was a poet, lived around the 40 BC, and there was a reference to Ovid's telling of it being a fairly late telling. So there's all these different incarnations of it, and so we the basic bones of the story that we used sort of as an aggregate from all these different stories, including Clash of the Titans, Brian mentioned. Basically, Medusa is a priestess to Athena, or in our version, a priestess in training to Athena, and she's raped in the temple of Athena by the god Poseidon. And then, as in revenge, Athena is so outraged that her temple would be desecrated in the traditional telling, that she punishes Medusa for being tempting to Poseidon. And so Medusa, before this, is considered one of the most beautiful women, and she has this ravishing hair. And so Athena transforms Medusa's beautiful hair into venomous snakes, and Medusa's gaze, famously, anybody who looks at her is turned to stone. And she's banished. And then later on, the hero Perseus, who's also the son of Zeus, goes to where Medusa is and decapitates her. And then after Medusa is beheaded, her head still has the power to turn things to stone. And so he takes Medusa's head as a weapon and uses it to turn the Kraken to stone. The Kraken is this huge sea monster, and he rescues the damsel Andromeda who's been chained naked, of course, to a rock and is going to be devoured by the monster. And so there's a handful of enduring problems here to unpack. Like one, a woman is sexually assaulted and then blamed and punished for the crime. And then after that, Medusa is living peacefully in her cave by herself, and this young dude Perseus breaks into her head and breaks into her house and cuts her head off. And he's considered the hero. And then all of that is motivated by this idea that he has to save this defenseless damsel, Andromeda.
So
there we go.
Literally, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And so we use the word reclaimed a lot. I mean, it's in the title of the show, and it's how we promote it. How is your story different than the original, and how would you say that the story of Medusa has been reclaimed?
Well, I wanted to after Nathan's description, it's one thing I want to emphasize. This is one of the oldest adventure stories we have, at least that's been written, and it really sort of sets the stage for how we view a lot of these issues, and so that is one reason that I was interested in it. But it all started. This sort of idea of reclaiming it when I had a conversation with my friend Timotha, who lives on the West Coast, and she was visiting, and she's a priestess of Hecate and a poet. And so for me, like the gods and goddesses are real, like archetypally or energetically. So I had the question of Timotha. I said, do you really think Athena would have punished Medusa? And then Timotha made the perfect point. Well, it was written by man. But I wonder if Athena was giving her a new role, and that sort of started my wheels turning. And I started writing it, doing some research. I told Nathan I had this idea. We both read a book called The Medusa Reader, and did a lot of that research. But then I started writing the script, thinking I wanted to unpack all of these issues, but I wanted it to be to tell the original story, the way it was told, that it was so close that you could see I get why people think it went this way, but really here's what's underneath. And so much of mythology is, or our stories, even our American story, is told from the victor's point of view, right? So I felt like there's something underneath here. And that led me to Crete and Athens. I took a trip there with my dear friend Chloe Erdman, who was so instrumental in all of this. She gives tours to ancient goddess sites in Crete, and she was living in Athens and introduced me to her friends, some who were watching, and took me into caves and temples, and I learned so much from her. So what I found out was that before Greece, before even we heard the name Athena, the Minoans lived on Crete, 3000 BC. They worshipped a snake goddess. That's from what we can understand of them. We can't read their language, but their art seems to show that. They were priestesses who had snake crowns, and the Minoans, as what's depicted in their art and what we know, and I was able to talk to archaeologists there that Chloe introduced me to, Carol Christ, who's a feminist scholar. We had great conversations about it. The Minoans were peaceful and joyful and sensual, and there was no war. There's no evidence of war or even monarchs, and these priestesses seemed to be the leaders. So that went on for a while, and then 1800 years or something, they had this thriving civilization, and then it was wrecked by some natural disasters or weakened. And then the Mycenaeans came in, and you can see the timeline when you're looking at their art, how their art changes and becomes more sort of militaristic, like these guys are the more patriarchal. And then they took over, and then that sort of disintegrated, and there was a dark age of Greece. And then a couple hundred years later, Athens rises, and one of their earliest stories is of Perseus killing a snake-headed monster woman. So I felt like there's a line here that I'm interested in kind of as an artist reimagining, and that's sort of the reclaiming part. Is, I feel like there's the Minoans who are indigenous to Crete, and their rituals and their legacy has something to do with Medusa, and that's where I went with the story.
And then as far as the characters, these characters that we've come to know through lots of other retellings, Brian did a lot of sort of subtle adjustments to perspective on those characters, so that there's sort of an unfolding of a reclaiming of those characters. I have 3 quick examples. Athena, who is the goddess of war and wisdom. War, not like Ares is also the god of war, but kind of macho aggressive war. And Athena is wisdom, sort of strategic war. So Athena in the original story is a punisher in some ways, but in this telling is sort of weaving this strategic path towards restorative justice, but she's also complicit in this system. She's part of this pantheon of gods that has in a lot of ways oppressed these people. So she's aware that she's sort of perpetuating this abuse, and comes to wrestle with that, and becomes involved in this long game to try to rectify that. And then Perseus, who we know as the sort of the stereotypical male warrior, we hope in this story, he sort of starts off that way, and then we hope that he transforms, evolves into an example of positive masculinity, somebody who can feel empathy and who can hold space and who can listen. And then Andromeda, who is considered, the most beautiful woman in the world, basically. She's a damsel in a lot of the original tellings. In this telling, she's not a powerless prop at all, but she's really developed into one of the heroes, and she's examining her culture, and she sees this social and political unraveling, and she seeks to make practical and structural change. And also a note, in our telling of the story, Andromeda is Black, and in Ovid's telling of the story, she was Black, one of the most beautiful women in the world, and Black. And in Western art, she's been whitewashed. There's hundreds of paintings with Andromeda, and she's almost always white in those paintings. So we were trying to reclaim that part of the story as well.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you for pointing that out. It's very important. So in addition to writing the piece as a play, it's also a musical. So I'm curious of what the composition process was like, but before I let the two of you answer it, I'm going to turn it over. We have another special guest from the creative team, Renee Dupuis, who is a composer and singer for Medusa and What Time Is It, Mr.Fox? And she has taped some of her insights on what it was like to compose for the piece, but also to perform in the planetarium as a part of it. So we're going to turn it over to Renee. Thank you.
Hi, James. Hi, friends. Thanks for having me. To start, getting a gig at the Museum of Science was a dream come true. I have so many amazing memories as a kid going to the Museum of Science. So when I walked into the planetarium for the first rehearsal for Medusa, I had that old feeling of joy and excitement and nervousness that I used to get as a kid, and it really paved the way for a great experience through and through. One of the most challenging things about playing in the planetarium is that it's a dome, and it's unlike any other venue I had ever played in before. The band was set up in a circle around the projector facing out to the audience, so we didn't have any line of vision between us. And that's how we communicate musically on stage, so it took some getting used to, but the team there was so great, giving us time to identify those areas that we needed to run before each show. And Joel was amazing, our sound guy, making sure that we could hear everything. And we were just super vigilant and listening to each other each show. I'll talk about a couple of the songs that really spoke to me during the run of Medusa. Songs that I sang in the show. The first one is Into the Black, which was during the cave scene. And the cave scene is this immersive visual experience where the cave is kind of spinning and you feel like you're in the cave with Phineas and Perseus and they're fighting and there's dialogue and the band plays in between these chunks of dialogue. So it's like dialogue, music, key change, dialogue. It's very exciting and high energy, and I looked forward to it every night. I also got to leave my station at the piano and wander through the crowd a little bit, and I really felt like I was in the cave with everyone and drawing them in, and it was a unique experience in that way. Another song I want to talk about is The Witness. The Witness was written for the show Medusa by Brian and Nathan, and when they brought it to me to sing, I was like, yes, I can't wait to sing this song. It speaks to larger themes of oppression and silenced voices and reclaiming power that we've felt like is taken away from us. So when I sing this song, I am singing it, of course, but I really feel like I am a vessel for this song, and that it's all of us singing it together, and paving the way for real change. Another song that I'll just mention is Ghost, which is a song that I wrote before we wrote the musical Medusa, but it fit in this scene and I was so happy about it. It's a lonely song, it's a quiet song, and happens at a subdued moment in the show. And as we're playing it and we're listening to each other as a band, we're also watching this gorgeous animated owl circle the dome, and then as we end the song, the owl morphs into a cloaked woman, and every night it's magical for me. So I hope it's magical for you too. Thank you.
Yay, Renee. Brian, if you want to come on and back and rejoin us, but Nathan, is there anything that you wanted to add from your perspective on that?
In terms of the music, the way, I mean, Renee sort of set up, first of all, the dynamics in the room are really interesting because you're back to back around. My neck always hurt at the end of the shows because I would really want to watch what was happening, and the music in the show was really designed to give space. So in a modern musical, the music is usually used to drive the narrative. So something is happening. There's a lot of action happening, and there's a lot of, oftentimes, even dialogue built into the music. And there's an ancient form in the old Greek chorus where instead of using musical interludes to propel the narrative, you'd instead have an opportunity for music to create a reflective space. You can think of it like if you were watching a movie and there's a piece of drama happening, and then there's a song that you link to that moment. That song almost becomes like an additional voice, and it creates a reflective space for you to process what's happening in the show. And there's a lot of intense themes. I mean, the show is witty, but it's also really intense. And I think everybody has a different place where their own lives and their own experiences plug into what's happening there. And so we wanted to create spaces where people can approach it wherever they're at.
And it works quite well. I mean, that's another way that I love about the structure is when you're watching these scenes and you go through these journeys with these characters, and then the wonderful band starts to play, and you have those moments of just sitting and reflecting on what just happened and how you've connected with it. And it's a brilliant use of the music.
Yeah. Shout out also to Dennis Monagle and Joe Cardoza, who we're not going to hear from in dialogue tonight, but Joe plays bass and Dennis plays drums, and they're marvelous to work with.
Yeah, it was a real collaborative process, because usually I write the songs for What Time Is It, Mr.Fox the majority of the time, and we do shows about, like my growing up queer experience, and I'm going to dress up as a clown and take the makeup off, and we've had these kind of theatrical shows that where the band has really supported my story and my experience. But with this show, because an underlying theme is collaboration, it's been more collaborative from the beginning. And like Renee wrote a song, and then Nathan and I wrote songs together, and then we would often bring him to the band as like skeletons. And like, so in the song The Witness, which we're going to hear later, that Renee mentioned, like Dennis's drums are so integral to that song. So it was a real collaborative process in that way, and really fun to come up with that music.
Yeah. And speaking of the music, because now that we've talked about it, I'm sure everyone wants to hear more, just like I do. And this is one of my favorites from the show. Brian, can you tell us about what we're about to hear?
So the next song is called Learning to Drown, and it's really Andromeda's song. As Nathan mentioned earlier, Andromeda's trying to make change in the world, and she's sort of our activist. And she's a leader, but at this moment in the show, she's feeling very oppressed and tired by how the gods are treating people. And personally, it speaks to me about anyone who's feeling like they've been betrayed by the government or the justice system. And as a queer person, I know that sometimes that stuff that's put on us is internalized, and it shows up in relationship as well. So that's why it's kind of on two levels. It's a personal song for me, but also a song for Andromeda.
Great. And so this is Learning to Drown. Enjoy.
The people of Athens have been strengthened by your faith, your willingness to stand by Athena.
I put my faith in her ideals. Reason, justice, equality, compassion.
You must not lose that faith.
But perhaps the Athena I worshipped was mostly of my own invention. As I sit here, I'm reminded of her cruel punishment of Medusa.
Maybe she did what was necessary.
I'm done trying to justify the will of the gods.
Can't do this anymore. What were we hoping for? Keep pounding on a bolted door till our fists bleed. I can't read what's in your eyes. Can there be another compromise when all we've left to sacrifice is everything we need? Thought I understood what we had to do. Thought we were good with what we knew. The deeper we dive in, the faster we go down. Is that how we were taught to swim? Trying to breathe while learning to drown. How are we keeping score? Waging someone else's war with the weapons we both swore we'd never use. You say I'm losing faith, but who laid this world to waste? How does that victory taste? Is it better to lose? Because we begin like every fool, thinking we can win, playing by the rules. The deeper we dive in, the faster we go down. Is that how we were taught to swim? Trying to breathe while learning to drown. Learning to drown.
Yay! And we are back. I love that song.
Thank you so much. And Jason did such a great job.
Yes, and we'll hear from Jason soon. I did want to just, talk a little bit about the creative process. And it looks like we have another. There we are. So Nathan is back, and we have another special guest from our creative team, Eileen Little. Hi, Eileen. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to quickly just talk a little bit about what your role was on the team?
Yeah. So my name is Eileen Little. I'm an actress. I'm an MFA in acting. I'm also a circus performer. I'm also married to this guy, and a longtime fan of What Time's to Mr.Fox. And also having been in the circus for like their CD release, both their CDs actually, I got to perform on Ariel at Oberon and Gloucester Stage. And so we've been working together for a long time. So it was really fun to direct this one. So just to kind of go through the process, you know, starting just even with casting, when we sent out the casting call, we got submissions from New York as well as Boston. And what was interesting is that we'd have so much talent, but we really had to make sure that all the voices are very distinct from each other, even though this is a very visual show, as you could tell from before and what Ruth will talk about in a little bit. It's not classically animated with, you can see people talking. So we had to make sure that everyone was very, very distinct. This was also taken into account when directing. We had 2 days at Bangasong in Gloucester. And I had to make sure as a director not to even look at the actors as much as I wanted to, because I didn't want to be biased by their gestures or their facial expressions. Because we also only had 2 days, we couldn't go in order. And so, you know, the actors were really good at just kind of taking everything in stride. And, you know, one of the actors in particular, Nadia Delemny, who plays Aphrodite, who's fabulous, came in and she just had to do all of her lines in one go with nobody else to act it with. And she even brought her own wine bottle and glass to drink off of, which you can hear in the story was all her. And it was fabulous. This also, you know, with providing the luxury of editing, because it isn't theatrical, because it is not theatrical, but you know what I mean, with a radio play and editing, you know, there were times when we would, you know, ask an actor to say, you know, literally one word 20 times in a row to get that precise moment that then of course we would edit, you know, later on, which was, you know, consisted of Brian, Nathan and I on my couch for many days on end. Is that hours? Is that good? Is that okay? That works. But the scenes that really worked the best, I thought, were the ones when we just really let the actors just kind of run with it, especially with like Laura and Richard, who played Athena and Poseidon. This also added for some great improv moments, which added some humor to it as well. Dennis Monagle, who is Apollo, just randomly called Poseidon Water Daddy, and which he is, and we kept it because it was just such a great little moment that he added in there. And Brian himself with the script, like he does a really good job with making it a realistic piece, even though it's mythology, right? And so adding humor and levity to it, you know, so as to counterbalance the darker moments in the play, which is what life is, right? And because just like life, you know, we deal with sex, we deal with politics, religion, and family, and we need to find those moments of laughter in order to make it work. So we just keep going one day at a time. And so I thought with the script, Brian did a really great job of that, and the actors really just added that extra element to it, and we just had a really fun time with it.
Yeah. There were some really great moments when all the gods were in the room, all laughing with each other, and it was a beautiful time. And I loved watching Eileen work, because you were like a ninja. Like, so and everyone felt so comfortable working with Eileen. You could so many people emailed after, were like, that's like the most fun I've ever had, and I felt so supported in my role, and it was wonderful. We had a great time.
You can tell because of the quality of the final product. So that's so incredible to hear. Can you three just talk a little bit, for anyone that is watching that hasn't seen the show, which that's your loss, and hopefully you check it out. But can you just talk a little bit about the structure of the production? And, it was originally conceived, I don't know if everyone knows, as a stage play. And so what was the process like and the timeline like to adjust it? And what did you have to do to sort of restructure it or reformat it to fit into a planetarium, which is
Yeah.
still at this point a really sort of new medium for live performance?
Right. I mean, Nathan, do you want to describe what it actually?
Yeah, we would run into these when we were doing like press for it leading up to the first time. We'd be sort of talking about it, and people kept being like, "But what is it?" And we'd say, "Right, right, right," and they'd be, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about. What would I experience if I walked in?" So the script is rendered basically as a radio play. And the hope was that it could exist completely on its own as a radio drama. And then the visuals, when we first were sort of thinking about what was doable, we were thinking they were going to be fairly minimalist. And then the animation team is so amazing that it became fairly the opposite of that. But so you have a story that's told radio play style. You have visuals that are sometimes sort of metaphorical, sometimes they're representing a character, but oftentimes they're representing a place, so you'll be in the temple. And because, I mean, what we're seeing visually here are these two-dimensional renderings that Jason has done, which is amazing, so we have examples, but that's very, very different than being in the dome, because you have this very specific space. So you're in the temple or you're in the cave, and that sense of place is really powerful, I think. The other thing that's really powerful is that when we are floating in space, it's very disorienting. There's a scene where the structure that we're in starts sort of unfolding and turning around, and it's really disorienting. And because you're on your back looking up, it creates both this very specific sense of space and then very specifically the opposite of that. And then it also allowed you to put the gods way up high. So the gods are above looking down, and maybe they're looking down protectively, or maybe they're looking down oppressively, and then the mortals are at a lower sphere. So you have those, and then you have live band that, like we said earlier, is playing in these reflective intervals.
Yeah, the live band right in the center. And I just want to say something about James and all the work that you've curated in the dome has been so wonderful. And that was a real inspiration, because we got to go and see Ruby Rose Fox and Walter Sickert and Molly Sastry and all of these fantastic musical artists and theater artists and Liars and Believers. And so I got to experience a bunch and then think like, oh, I'd like to do this and that. And so that really helped us design it specifically for that space and that experience. And as Nathan expressed, like the visceral was something we wanted to, that was very intentional from the beginning, that when you're sitting there in the audience, you are in the story. And it's hard to explain unless you're there, but that's the response. So there were people who came back every single show because they just wanted to be in that space again. I want to be in a different part of the space, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. It's a room that you kind of slightly notice different parts of the show or the performance that you didn't, depending on where you sit in the dome, because it is a 360-degree space. So the audience is all in the round, and it's fun to, you know, sometimes be on one side and watch, you know, Renee, and then sit on the other side and watch Dennis. And so the space, you have done such a revolutionary job of reimagining how the space can be used and how to direct attention of when the audience should be watching the dome and when the audience should be sort of, you know, enjoying the live music performance that's happening in front of them. And that is, I think, a challenge of the space, and in the way that you've structured it is just genius. And so you recorded the dialogue first, and the script was finalized first. And you know, Eileen, I know that you touched a little bit about it, but are there any other, because it is a very, there are some very serious moments and some heavy themes that are explored, but there also are some really comedic aspects of the show and of the script. And you mentioned the Water Daddy line. I laugh literally every single time, and I've seen the show, I don't know how many times now. But are there any other like comedic moments that come to your mind, and how did you as the director sort of balance with the voice actors between, you know, those dramatic moments and the comedy?
I mean, we were very fortunate where we had talented actors who would just kind of, like I said, run with it. And, you know, later on in editing, we, you know, like, because when you're in the studio, you can just let people do whatever they want. And everyone was professional enough where no one, you know, took it too far or anything. And we knew what we were dealing with in terms of the subject matter. And so when we did have those natural moments of levity, especially with the gods when they were by themselves, you know, because they're just in a lot of ways, they're like, you know, our what is it, the super ego, like they're the biggest of ourselves. And so we can really laugh at them. And so like when they really get going with each other, you know, they've been doing this for centuries or however long, you know, they can just go at it. And it was just so much fun. So we really just kind of let them do their thing. And then Brian also had, you know, natural moments in it too, you know, with his script of finding that levity. So it was when we were editing, when we're like, you know, when the three of us would sit, be like, okay, should we keep that in there? Like, that's really funny to us, but does it actually forward the story, or does it actually take away? Does it detract? So that was the big deciding factor, was as long as it keeps the story going forward, then we would keep it in there, because everyone likes a good laugh. Everyone likes to kind of keep it uplifting. And if it, you know, went a little too far, or if it just didn't do anything for it, we were like, all right, that's funny between us, but we'll take it back. So
there was also side note, when we were in the studio, there was a 3-day blizzard. And so we had meticulously scheduled everybody's recording times, but some people were coming from New York and some people were coming from New Hampshire, and there was a blizzard. And so everything was a mess. So everybody was rolling with this kind of ridiculous situation, and everybody did come in, but that also sort of created this.
I was also very pregnant.
Oh, right.
While doing this. So, and sitting on the couch editing it, it was rather interesting.
One other shout out to Eileen. This was the first time I'd been in a room while Eileen was directing before. And I learned what a line reading was this day. For everybody who has ever done any acting, you can roll your eyes. But Eileen so a line reading is when you tell your actor how you want to hear the line. And it's apparently a bad habit. And Eileen didn't do it at all, and all the actors would leave the studio, and you could hear them sort of talking like, that was great. There were like no line readings, and what happened was that the actors really sort of stepped into the roles, and so there were things that Brian and I had imagined, and then Eileen got involved, and then Eileen did such a nice job of sort of setting a high bar, but then getting out of the way. And so the collaboration extended into the actors, I thought, who took a lot of ownership of those roles.
Yeah, and particularly like Richard Terriot also is Poseidon, brought so much comedy to that role. And Poseidon's a jerk in this play, but the intention was that you like him. And that is, you know, that's where, you know, the seductive patriarchy, where the people are like, oh, he's like kind of cool, he's making me laugh, he is awful, and that, so your relationship to them is more complex, as opposed to like, oh, he's just a bad guy, you know. And Richard really brought that, and then and all the actors, I mean, when we did, as a scene we'll talk about later, but you know, it was quite extraordinary to be in the studio when everyone was away and all the laughter was gone, and we were doing those intense moments as well. So it was kind of a roller coaster.
Great. So we have the script and the dialogue was recorded and finished, and then it was passed on to the next important part of the process, which was designing for the visuals on the dome. And we actually have some of that team here with us. So I'm going to ask our next special guest to join our Brady Bunch blocks here. So Ruth Lingford and Jason Fletcher, welcome.
Hi.
Can you please, first of all, I got to shout out, Ruth is joining us from the UK and stayed up very late or woke up very early, depending on how you look at it, to be here tonight. So we thank you so much. Can you both just quickly introduce yourselves and talk about your role in the process?
Hi, I'm Ruth Lingford, and I'm an animator, and I animated a lot of the 2D graphic moving elements of the visuals.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Fletcher. I'm a science visualizer at the planetarium. So half the time I'm making visuals of space, and the other half of the time I get to work on special events like this, which is so much fun. And so for this, I did 3D animation for some of the scenes, and then also all the compositing, bringing everything together, all of Ruth's and Nora's and my team's work into the scenes that you experienced.
Great, and you mentioned there is a third member of the visualization team that isn't with us live tonight, Nora Solorzano, who is based in Albuquerque. We'll hear from Nora in a little bit, but can one of you just quickly, for context for the conversation, what was her contributions to the visuals?
Yeah, so Nora made, she was like our sculpture artist. So she made like columns and these clay figurines that were then also hand-drawn, and then the columns were also hand-drawn by Ruth. So there was moments where we could interplay between the two. And then Nora also made a few other elements, but everything that she did was always, she was making the real object and then taking photographs of it.
Great. And so Ruth, I want to start with you. I have a question for you. Can you just talk about what your first impression or your first reaction was when Brian and Nathan approached you about designing for a planetarium?
Well, I've known these guys a long time. I always say yes to anything they suggest. And it was a challenge though, because my work's very flat. It's very simple, very graphic, very, very flat, very 2D. And I wasn't quite sure how it could work spatially. I wasn't quite sure whether it would work. Plus, you know, the technical challenges of mapping it onto the dome were quite worrying. But luckily, it was when I met Jason and realized what his role was, it was really great. And then I went along at one point I gave him some 2D animated elements, and then he put them together for the dome, and I went to have a look, and that was the most extraordinary magic experience of seeing my drawings moving in this space. Plus, you know, when you're in the planetarium, you're kind of lying back looking, and you enter this kind of dream state, which is so great for animations, very very dreamlike anyway. And it was just a really magic, thrilling thing. And it was great to just give the very simple elements to Jason and let him mess about with the technology. So I got off very lightly.
And I think what's so brilliant about, one of the brilliant things about the show is that the visuals are this fusion of Ruth's hand-drawn illustrations and then the incredible digital work that Jason designs and that the planetarium is used to. And to see the two of them come together, it's startling in the best way for the first time of like, I've never seen anything like that on a planetarium dome. So can you talk about what that process was like for the two of you of fusing together those two styles and how that collaboration was?
Yeah, so I think we got the script pretty early on, and we each sat on it, I think for like a month or so, which was a good amount of time to brew and kind of come up with our own ideas. But it was that first test that Ruth mentioned where we came together and we watched stuff on the dome, and that's where we were able to meld together our ideas. And a good starting point, because Ruth's is actually hand-drawn animation, is to lay out in the script of what moments needed hand-drawn elements, and also for Ruth too. For Nora, sorry. And from there, we kind of figured out what elements we needed. And then the difficult but fun part was understanding what scenes needed to be literal or what needed a more atmospheric or even abstract approach. And that was always fun because it's like I had to like really use my imagination and like pull from my day-to-day of what was inspiring me at the moment, and yet draw that into the story and not make it and have it be relevant, right? Because if it's distracting, this story has some very serious moments, and you have to be delicate with that, and it's worth the fight, worth the trouble of that. I can actually share a bit behind the scenes also.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know people ask all the time, Jason, like, what does it take to design for a planetarium? Like, what does the software look like? So if you could share a little bit of your screen and a little bit of that process, that would be great.
Yeah, so to start with that, so when you make footage for a planetarium, I can share my screen. So, all right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So, make sure, yep, footage is good. So when you make footage for a planetarium, you work in the fisheye format. So you can't work in the normal rectangular format like for screens. So in this scene, this is Andromeda at the rocks, and then the Kraken is rising up out of the water. So this is a good scene where we're combining together Ruth's and my team's 3D animation together. And so to do a quick breakdown behind this, I want to show you how we did this. So Ruth didn't work in the fisheye format. She did everything hand-drawn flat with green screen so that we could then extract the green part of the image and be left with the transparency so that we could then layer it and do whatever, composite it together. And then from there, I brought everything into After Effects. And here you can see everything laid out. And this is laid out in the equirectangular format, just a fancy name for, in virtual reality, you have to map everything onto a sphere. So we work in a VR format, but then instead of a sphere, we do half of a sphere. So this is fisheye. And then from there, I layered it some more with different textures, just to give the Kraken like a kind of ocean feel. And then from there, bring everything together. Like here's some clouds that we had used in a different production, but like warped and changed for this. And then the rocky shore, which Chuck made just for this. And then Andromeda, some hand-drawn from Ruth. And then of course the Kraken. But the Kraken had some different layers, like the glow behind it, and then bringing in the actual hand-drawn animation, making it pop, and then even brighter. And then we have Perseus, not visible at this moment, and then the toxic gas on top of that. That wasn't like essential to this scene, but it helped make the moment, and then the rain, of course. It helped like bring everything together to make it immersive. But one last thing about this, one thing that's hard to get across with everything that you're seeing in this flat way, we've like reformatted it to work in this flat format. It may feel slow here, but in the planetarium, you're literally being transported to different environments. So what we can do in the planetarium, we can't always get away with on a flat screen. So if you're thinking, oh, it was kind of slow, I don't know, like it's hard we can't always reformat it and it's just gonna work because it's a different format, right?
Yeah,
so
that's great. And Ruth, quickly, what was it like the first time that you saw the show and you saw the work gigantic on the dome fused with all this digital animation as well?
It's almost overwhelming, actually. It's very rich. It's a little bit like being force-fed fruitcake. It's very overwhelming sensory experience. I really loved how Jason played with sort of taking the motifs that I'd made and repeating them around the space so that, they formed an environment that was fabulous. And I thought everything sort of fused together really well.
Great.
And I was nervous about that at some points because I felt like I was taking a bit of a leap. It's like, well, we didn't like discuss this, but it fits the scene. So it's like at some point.
We were so grateful. We were so grateful you were putting it together. We were not going to quibble.
It was a fun collaboration.
I'm not going to be a diva about what you've done with my animation. Just
you never know, like there's all sorts of collaborations, you know.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you both for your work and for being here and sharing tonight. As we said, there's one other member of the team who couldn't be with us live. That's Nora, but she did send in some insight about what it was like to design for the Dome while in Albuquerque. And so we'll hear that, and then we'll go right into another excerpt and song from the show called The Witness. So here is Nora and The Witness. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Nora, and I worked on animation and art for Medusa. So I had never designed animation for a planetarium space before, and that presented a unique and exciting challenge for me, particularly because of the fact that I wouldn't have access to the space beforehand. So I had to basically come up with ways to kind of simulate or recreate that planetarium experience for myself within the confines of my apartment where I was working. So I took two approaches. One was to create small-scale models of spaces from the story that I could then shoot in 360 degrees for the planetarium dome. And then the other approach was in looking at a lot of art material from the Minoan culture, frescoes, original art pieces, recreations of art pieces, and really immersing myself in that visual iconography of the culture and the time period. And it was just really beautiful material. And then having the chance to take those images and bring them to life through animation was just really enjoyable, really exciting, and I really loved that part of the process. So ultimately, I sent all my materials back to the museum team, and I had a idea in my head of how everything would come together in the planetarium space, but I really didn't know what things were going to look like until I actually showed up for the first performance along with the rest of the audience and experienced it live, real time with them for the first time. And just having that experience in the space of then finally getting to see everything come together, the music, the performance, the vocals, and the imagery was really thrilling because I didn't quite know what I was going to see ultimately. And just seeing how everything did come together, Ruth's beautiful work and Jason and his team's work in pulling all of the different elements together on the dome in ways that were unique to even what I was imagining was a thrilling experience.
You want me to make a show of my strength by publicly punishing a victim of Poseidon's pathological violence.
Oh, you mean his lust. We are gods, but are we not also men, my daughter? Maybe sometimes we get carried away,
How many tears have been shed for the so-called lust of men? Zeus, I believe your wife Hera has lost count. Hades kidnapped and raped Persephone in the spring of her youth. Sisters, have we not all seen the tragic casualties of our brothers' unsolicited affections?
Ah, hypocrites! Aphrodite hunts mortal men for sport.
Apollo's right. Remember, we men are not the ones who started the Trojan War over vanity and love.
You still don't understand the difference between love and tyranny.
Wise Athena, just go down there and do your magic. Remember, you were born from my head and took most of my brains with you. You play politics better than any of us.
I wouldn't have to play so much better if you and your brothers actually played by the rules.
Athena, your people expect a response from you. You decide what form it takes.
we can do a whole lot more with this kind of rage.
And we're back. That was Renee on vocals on that song. Ugh, I love that moment in the show. So we're back with Brian, and I'd love to at this point talk about some of the themes here in the piece. And our next special guest is here. This is our final chunk of the evening, and we're joined by Laura Crook-Waxtell. Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Thank you for joining us. Can you just quickly talk a little bit about the several hats that you wore in this piece?
Sure. First of all, I'm an actor and a writer and sometime director, and more recently a more vocal member of the Me Too community. But for this piece, I originally Brian told me that I came in late. I came probably quite late. Brian had already written the script and was still in development. And he asked me, he said, do you want to read it? And I was like, yes, please, I do. And I think I was maybe 5 or 6 pages in, and I emailed him or texted him, and I just said, whatever you need, I will do for this piece. It spoke so clearly to me, and was whatever he needed. So the first thing he wanted to talk to me about was how to approach and treat I think probably the most difficult scene in the show, which is the rape of Medusa. As an actor, I have played roles of characters who have been sexually assaulted, and as a human, I have been sexually assaulted. So I came to it with some knowledge, if you will.
Yeah. So, and I think we're going to definitely talk about that scene. Before we go there, though, Brian, can you just tell us a little bit about the song we just heard?
So that song's called The Witness, and I love the way Renee sings that song. It's just, in the moment in the show when we do it live, it's just like, it's stunning, and I'm so grateful to have her be part of this. But the song really speaks to rage, and holding space for rage and anger. Justified anger is a powerful force. And I think in our culture, we often are afraid of it. And Laura and I were actually talking the other night about it being sort of like the pot of boiling water on the stove. And in our culture, we either blame the water for boiling, or we try to put a cover over it, as opposed to like fixing the systemic issues that are going on, like by turning off the stove or dismantling the stove, or turning down the heat, or eliminating the cause of the whether it's abuse or systemic racism, whatever the larger picture is. So in the show, Athena that's what she's feeling. She's been kind of complicit in this patriarchy, but she's had enough, and she wants to make a huge change. And it's called The Witness because Laura and I also had some conversations about the difference between the role of a witness versus the role of a bystander in sexual assault or sexual harassment, and many other issues too. Like the witness is the active role where you can make a difference, you can help, you can hold space, you can advocate, while a bystander might perpetuate what's been going on by being silent and just letting it happen.
Yeah. One of the other things that I love about the show, one of the many things, what I think has resonated with audiences is how relevant this ancient myth has become to our modern day Me Too era. So can the two of you discuss some of the social justice themes that are, for me, at the heart of the experience?
Do you want to start?
How much time do you have?
I think, so I voice Athena, obviously, and it was quite a feat. Brian's writing and the way he wrote her has a lot of dimensions and a lot of nuance, and I think that it's it resonates so deeply because each of the things that she is feeling or portraying is a part of these sort of pillars that hold up the social structures that do not serve us, right? You can call that patriarchy, you can call it systemic racism, there's a lot of structures that don't serve us. And that we are allowed to chip away, to identify the intricacies of pattern that create those things. So, you know, Athena doesn't want these things to happen, but she certainly witnesses them from a place of privilege. I mean, from Olympus, and she doesn't do anything. And she has to come to terms with that. And that's such a key part of the equation when it comes to really breaking things apart and holding ourselves accountable, as well as allowing other people to come to their accountability. Because ultimately we all want the same thing. Ultimately, Athena wants the same thing that Medusa wants. I mean, sometimes I felt like I had like Medusa in one ear and Athena in the other ear. And I just was like, I'm trying, ladies, I'm doing my best. But it's really important to talk of all of those dimensions and all of those points of view to really see what we're dealing with and break it down piece by piece.
Yeah, and I would thank you for saying that, Laura, the way you did, because that was the intention, is showing that there are these many sort of interacting systems too, because you have the gods up there kind of enforcing their will on the humans, but then you have these characters like Andromeda, who are starts off in a privileged place as sort of like a princess, and then starts seeing that, you know, these traditions that she's been upholding don't work. So she's also holding herself accountable. And that's sort of a running theme through the whole show, is addressing these themes head on. As Nathan said at the beginning, also Perseus goes through such a transformation, because he's kind of like the soldier who's, you know, taking the orders, and then when he meets this other character on Crete, this woman of Crete, he starts questioning those orders, and realizes that he also has power, you know, to choose a different path. So those are some of the themes that are woven through from, and from the beginning. Is like when I talked at the top of the show, or the top of the broadcast, about being queer and being told I was, you know, being female was bad. That's always struck me as like, we're starting from a hierarchical pattern where someone's worth is more than someone else's worth, even in a family, you know. And that is what is the theme that's throughout the show, is more about collaboration, dismantling those kinds of hierarchies where you can have difference, you can have respect for difference, where Medusa is sort of magical and in ritual, and that's her point of view, but Andromeda is more secular, even becomes an atheist, but as an activist, and they can work together and to dismantle the structures that are oppressing both of them in the show.
There's a clip of dialogue that I want to share and show. Before I do, another question is, there's an incredibly powerful scene where Medusa is attacked and sexually assaulted. How did you approach this creatively, and did you do research, and what has the response been from audiences to that moment?
So it needed to be in there because it's so much about her story in the original story, that the priestess was raped, and then what happens after that. And I wanted, that story to be told, but wanted it to be not gratuitous, not in the way that, we see in so many films where a person is sexually assaulted and that's just a device for the hero or the father figure or someone to go get revenge, and then we never see what happens after that. But also, so many sexual assault survivors I'm friends with, and then my own experience, I didn't want it to be triggering for people who are in this dome, in this very, very visceral space that you are, it's sort of a sacred space. So that's when I reached out to Laura and also our friend Shayna Doberman, who has been a sexual assault counselor, and she's also been a domestic violence counselor. And we had some wine, and we just went through it. And that's where they gave me a lot of great feedback about getting to that nuanced place where Poseidon is, doesn't come in,
Twirling
obvious.
the mustache.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not twirling the
That
mustache.
guy that comes in there, and what I was saying to Brian when we did maybe have some wine, I said that he can't be a bad guy. He can't look like a bad guy. That the audience, for them to have that moment of that pivotal moment to really experience it without experiencing it, we had to make sure that they just did not see it coming. So that that the audience doesn't see it coming, that Medusa doesn't see it coming. Like I said, if he comes in twirling his mustache, like here comes the bad guy, the audience is left off the hook. The audience gets to say, well, how come she didn't see that coming? If they don't see that, because you don't see it coming, then the audience is left in a place just as Medusa, which is just blindsided. And I talked about how Poseidon needed to be charming and disarming, and unfortunately, a little seductive, and that lures her into a place of vulnerability, like what a predator does. And I think that it was done really deftly and beautifully and not overwhelmingly. And the audience could go where they needed to go, but they were definitely in full empathy with Medusa.
And the animation supported that piece, that part of it, I think, in a way that we were so happy with. Nora created a statue of Athena, so you could look up at Athena during this. You didn't watch the rape, you could hear what was going on, but it gave audience members the option, of something to focus on. And at the same time, you could project what you wanted. Was she a bystander or was she a witness? And I thought that was being a powerful moment.
Yeah.
So do you want to set quickly, Brian, this scene that we're going to see up really quickly for us?
Yes, sure. So what's coming up now is some dialogue for the aftermath of the scene. What happens in the show is we see there's the assault, and then there's a song that we're going to hear Renee sing. And then after that is the aftermath, where Athena, disguised as an old woman, comes down and visits Medusa.
Great. So here's the scene, and then we'll come back to finish this conversation up.
My child, I've come with some soothing tea. Please drink. And my cloak, it's warm. I've never understood why these temples have to be so cold.
I'm lost.
Yes, I know. You did nothing wrong.
I thought I'd be safe here, with her watching over me.
Evil is like ivy. It can grow in bright sun or in any dark corner, even in a temple.
Why did my goddess not protect me?
I don't know.
I am alone.
What do you need?
To be alone. Far away from this. Forever.
Why did you want to serve the goddess Athena?
I've always felt it was my destiny.
Truly, no desire for love or for family.
Why is that the only way?
It isn't. But why not for you?
It's never been my calling to serve a man, to be his subject, his object.
Is there no honor in love and motherhood?
Oh, for many, I know there is. But I've needed something else.
Why Athena? Why not Aphrodite, Hera, Demeter?
For one, she is not a mother. She is not married. My own mother, she told me stories of Athena. She's slow to react, steady, strong, cunning, and wise. She decides her own fate. I've hoped the same for myself, but now there is nothing for me. No more a virgin. I can neither be priestess nor taken as a wife. Look, I thank you for your kindness, but my body is no longer my own. And soon I expect to be thrown upon the pyre, with my soul condemned to roam in the darkness of Hades.
I feel the gods may have a different fate in store for you.
Wow. So can the two of you just touch base about what's so powerful about that scene in that moment?
Everything. There's a lot. I mean, that's, Brian was talking about witness and bearing witness and witnessing. But, you know, I think for me, in the role of Athena in that moment, she really has to see her privilege. She has to look at where she has gone wrong, where she has rested on thinking that they'll take care of themselves and she doesn't have to do anything anymore. It's a hard place to be, but those difficult places are the places that we grow and where we let the light in. And I think that both Athena and Medusa are both serving this idea of showing a story that in love. I mean, that Athena loves her mortals and Medusa loved Athena. And there's a betrayal, there's a conversation, it's hard. And I think that audiences have probably at some point in their lives had a difficult conversation. And this is a great example of having a difficult conversation without feeling defensive and owning what is your part to own. And that's what it was for me in portraying Athena here.
And one of the things I want to mention is, you know, in my research, I found that that women who were priestesses of Athena in Athens had a lot of agency, had a lot of power, and women did not otherwise have any, you know, they couldn't own property, they couldn't vote, you know, it's, though we kind of think of them as this, you know, shining example of democracy, women didn't have much power. But so what's just happened to her has not only, you know, been this, you know, spiritual, emotional, physical assault, but it's also robbed her of this path that she, you know, was excited about and that meant so much for her. So and then when Athena, as the old woman, asks her what she needs, you know, she's thinking about how can I make this better? You know, we know we can't make it right, but how can I make it better? And then that sort of starts the course for the rest of the show. Where this is her long game of, not only am I going to help this woman and try to, you know, put her in a place that's, you know, where she can have some healing, but I'm also going to give her some power, and I'm going to make some big changes.
Great. And we have one more song from the show that we're going to share. Do you want to set this up for us?
So this is the song that is between the sexual assault and then the scene you just saw. It's sort of a space for the people to, you know, the audience to kind of reflect on what just happened. And as Renee said earlier, you see an owl kind of flying around. And it's Renee's song, and it fits so perfectly, even though she didn't write it originally, because this idea about a ghost and wanting this ghost, you know, wanting to have a connection with this ghost, but that also speaks to trauma and how, you know, we can be haunted and sort of stuff away ghosts in our bodies and in our minds. So this is a sort of a live version. This isn't what happens in the planetarium, but we put it together so we could all make music together from far away. So this is Ghost by Renee.
This is Ghost, and as Brian said, we're not sharing the visuals from the show in this one, but we're going to show a very important part of the piece, which is What Time Is It, Mr. Fox? So here's What Time Is It, Mr. Fox with Ghost.
I used to hope I'd see a ghost, explore old homes and dim lit corners and dusty books that smell like attic, alone at night with shaky hands. I might hold a swinging pendulum, waiting for a sight or sound. I thought I'd be a gracious host. Used to hope I'd see a ghost. Used to say I'd have no regrets. Life unfolds like a novella with notable things to tell. Ordinary stories too. Mistakes are worth the time it takes to live and grow and move along. A reservation's the day we left. Used to say I'd have no regrets. I used to hope I'd see a ghost, a living ghost stay tucked away in the dim lit corners of my brain, where I don't go when they should stay. Where I don't go when they should stay. Where I don't go when they should stay. I forgot you I don't want to see you I don't want to see your ghost.
That was so great seeing performers play together. What a wonderful way to end. We are at the end of our time here. I think it'd be great to bring out everyone that was on the live stream for a virtual curtain call. So Ruth and Jason, if you're still there, we'd love to have you come on. I thank you all so much for such an insightful conversation behind such an incredible piece that we're so honored to be a part of. Nathan, Brian, can you give us a sneak peek of what's next for the piece?
Well, thank you for letting us come and make this bring Medusa to life, because it's been such a wonderful experience and dream come true for all of us. So I want to say that up front. But what's coming next is, I mean, we're planning on doing it again someday, depending on what path opens up for us. We've also thought of maybe bring it to other planetariums. I don't know, maybe it has to be done in virtual reality. We'll see what the next step is that way. But it was originally written as a play, and that is also something that we're considering is trying to mount it as a fully staged play, still using elements of the animation, and because of the planetarium experience, wanting to retain that immersive, visceral feeling. Yes, that's Nathan. Do you have any other thoughts about that?
No, I think you nailed it. It woven throughout this whole process has been sort of talk about how collaborative it has been, and that James inviting us to do something in the planetarium sort of gave birth to this project in this iteration, and it feels like one step in some trajectory that we can't quite map yet. And there's now all these really brilliant people involved. And it just feels like it's bubbling and evolving in some really meaningful ways. And I feel like the characters keep speaking and keep educating us about how to keep this conversation going. And we're really appreciative to be part of this with all of you and everybody who's watching. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Yes, and there will be future life for Medusa with the museum, with the Charles Hayden Planetarium for sure. And we encourage everyone to just keep your eyes and ears open. As soon as we can get back on site with this incredible show, we definitely will.
And we're releasing a remix of Devil vs. Scarecrow, which you heard at the beginning. This is a remix by Big Bick, who's a Boston DJ that a lot of people know, who's is an incredibly talented producer, engineer, and musician, and kind of reimagined this song completely. So we're premiering it tonight, but it's now available on Spotify and all iTunes and all those things. Devil vs. Scarecrow, the dance mix. So I hope you guys can dance to it all weekend.
Yes, and we're gonna end on that note with that track and a credit slide, so you can check out everyone that's involved in this piece. Thank you all again. Thank you all for watching and spending your Thursday night with us. We hope you will continue to do so. I need to give another shout out to the Lowell Institute for making tonight possible. And again, encourage you to go to mos.org/Science Matters to keep programming like this happening. Thank you all. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Devil vs. Scarecrow remix. Have a great night, everyone.